Excellent.
So this is
I think we're live.
exciting. Kate, or Dr. Kate, and myself, Chanel, the nutritionist, we are doing a little chat today. And I have just recently met Kate. We met each other at the menopause conference called So Hot Right Now. It'll be 2 weeks nearly ago, and connected and had a chat, and like we're instantly on the same wavelength. And excited because we are going to try and do this on a regular basis where we can have chats and put information out to help our menopausal tribes out there. So I am excited to have this chat with you today, Dr. Kate, who the thing is, we both realize we have menopause stories as much as we also help women on their menopause journey. So I'm excited to do this, to start this with you. Maybe you can kick it off and let us know what did you love about last weekend, and what were some of your takeaways?
Look, I have to say it was probably one of the best conferences I've been to in terms of connections and things like that. And it was such an open group of ladies who are all there with the intention of helping their patients as best as they possibly can. So that was what was really nice about it for me. There was a few little academic takeaways for me, which were nice, and probably from my point of view, maybe more reinforcing some of the stuff that I do, which is great because we all work in a little bubble. So it's really nice to speak to some of the people who are experts and academics working in the area and go, I'm doing that. I'm on the right page. I'm giving my patients the best treatment that's out there, which is fantastic. So that was really nice. And I have to say, I just walked away from the whole event with my cup absolutely full. It was just so lovely to be in a
Yeah, for
room full
sure,
of women who
100%.
were
So
so
I suppose we
enthusiastic about
should
doing the absolute
actually
best.
bring all the
Yeah.
listeners up to speed and let them know a bit more about the event. It is called So Hot Right Now, and they had an event at the Sydney Opera House on the Saturday, and I went and took a few of my girlfriends to that, and they had no idea about some of the amazing guest speakers that were going to be there. So that was quite eye-opening for them. And then on Sunday, we had the clinical conference, which was all day, and it was really learning. And like for people like Kate and myself who help like basically menopausal women, like help them in their journey, for us to learn like from, and these are some of the world leaders like Dr. Von der Rij and Dr. Mary Claire Haver and Dr. Kelly Casperson and of course Dr. Louise Newsom. These doctors are the world leaders, really, aren't they?
Mm. Yeah, so these are definitely the ladies that are known as the menoposse. They absolutely have brought a really good voice and a really good focus to the whole menopausal conversation. And I think that yeah, I think Louise Newsom was probably the OG menopause doctor, and then a few of her American counterparts like Mary Claire Haver. She's an obstetrician gynecologist who has now a menopause clinic, and she freely admits that she was not the best menopause doctor until relatively recently, when she really actually had to do her own work and her own investigation and her own research, and further study to get on board with menopause. Dr. Kelly Casperson, who I have a lot of time for, she's a urologist, but she also specialises in
Yes.
sexual health for the midlife women, which I think is also super important for us to talk about. And Vonda Wright, of course. Vonda is an orthopedic surgeon, and she's all about, I guess, the musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause. So a lot of people end up with a frozen shoulder. And of course, there's always that risk of bone density loss, which is another area that she sort of does a lot of work in. And yeah, it was just a fantastic opportunity to see all of these women in one spot. And I guess on Saturday it was more that sort of social media presence and, good, well digested information for maybe people who aren't quite as academic as, but are really interested in what are the real facts? What is actually useful for me? What should I be talking to my doctor about? How do I start that conversation? Those sort of pieces of information are so, so useful for women in general. And then on Sunday, it was just more of that sort of, I guess, a little bit more deeper into the academic side of it and the research that
Yeah,
supports
because
some of
even
these
as you were
things
talking and
talking about it,
explaining
which
that,
was
I
really
thought, we
fantastic.
could almost do a
Mm,
podcast episode on each of the teachings we got from each of them because, I don't know how you felt. I just was like, the amount of things that I
mm,
learned,
mm,
and some of it was reinforcement, but some of it was just like, we are not talking about this, as women,
mm.
and so Kate, as a GP, maybe you can give us a bit of backstory on who you are and how you help women. I would love that.
Sure, sure. So I'm Dr. Kate Bendel. I actually work as the director of a women's health clinic called East Coast Menopause Solutions. I actually started that business 2 years ago, mainly because I was treated so badly in my own sort of perimenopausal phase. So I was 45 and felt like I was going a little bit mad, and got a referral to my gynecologist, who I adore and who I trust with my life. When I got there, I said, I'm clearly perimenopausal. You need to give me something. She said, what would you like? And I said, well, I don't know. That's why I'm here. And she said, well, I don't
Hmm.
know either. And I went, great. One of us is going to have to get educated then. Um, and so I guess from my point of view, I figured that I'm medical and I really struggled to get the help and support that I needed. There must be other women out there that are really struggling to get that help and support. So I started this little business 2 years ago, expecting it to be like a little 4 hour a week hobby job. Mm. I now have two other GPs who work for me that specialise in women's health. I have a midwife, I have a dietitian, a psychologist, and a nurse practitioner that specialise in
Yeah.
mental health. And we actually opened our own clinic just this week, which is so exciting. So we offer obviously in clinic appointments, but we also offer telehealth
Which is
for
kind of
anyone
what
who's
we're
sort of out of
finding, isn't
area
it?
and can't get the support they need wherever
So
they are.
this is what we're finding is that, like, here
Sorry,
you are, a
what
doctor
was that? Sorry.
yourself, and and of
Mm,
course this is because as a GP you don't get the training that's necessary. So it's this disconnect where you are in the
mm,
medical profession, and yet you're not getting the training that's needed to be able to even help yourself, let alone other women. So and like we saw, I don't know how many GPs were in the
mm,
room. There was maybe up to 300 people in the room, but not all of them were GPs. And that's such a small snippet of the
mm,
medical Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
mm. The amount of people that are out there. I completely agree. Yeah, yeah. And, I do hear women's stories when they come in and see me, and I might be the fourth or the fifth doctor that they've asked about, their perimenopausal or menopausal symptoms, and they've, variously been dismissed, or, well, it's just your age, or, this is a natural process, or go home and have a glass of wine, you'll feel better. Like, just really awfully dismissive kind of things told to them, and that I just don't think that women are
yeah,
getting
yeah.
the
So
support
how
and
do
respect that
you
they deserve in
see
this
any
space.
change for
Mm.
Australia in this area?
Mm. Well, I think we're kind of lucky. We are a little bit ahead of the eight ball. So this 2025 2024, there actually was a Senate inquiry into menopause, which concluded in September. And it has come up with some really great suggestions, one of which was to get the newer medications. So that's sort of some of the more
Mhm.
transdermal medications, so medication that goes across your skin, or some of the newer progesterones, which are less likely to have side effects or cause problems down the track, onto the PBS. And we've just had that happen on the 1st of March this year, which is great. So that's probably the first recommendation that's
Mhm.
come through from that inquiry in a very real and tangible way for women in Australia. The other things, of course, that were on that list of things that need to be done is providing more education. And
Oh,
they're actually talking about providing that education from school level, which I think is
yes,
amazing.
yes.
So, actually, in those PE style health classes, not only talking about periods and pregnancy, but also talking about menopause in a way, like down the track, this is something that might happen to you, so that people actually have a little bit of knowledge at least before they start. And then, obviously, major focus of
Mm,
education in medical school, because that is not happening at all, including people who are studying
right.
to be obstetrician gynecologists. They're not getting much focus either. And certainly when I went to medical school, we were still operating off the whole
Yep.
old Women's Health Initiative. Don't use HRT, it's really scary. And
Wow.
so
Okay.
we were sort of, it was treated in a very dismissive manner.
Yes. Yeah.
So that all has to really
Yeah, for
change, and
sure.
that will
And
take
so,
time,
in the
you know,
meantime,
but it's
clinics like
changing some
yourselves
skills.
are
Mm,
very important because there's this disconnect. And of course, you're seeing it, I'm hearing it from like women that I am obviously like helping, just not getting the support
mm,
or help they need. And so, really important for
mm,
us to have these conversations, but also offer some solutions, which it's so great that you guys are doing telehealth calls because so many people can't get their local doctor who's 5 minutes away to be on the same page or, like you said, even know anything about what they need.
mm. Yes, yeah. So we've got actually quite a lot of patients in some of the more country areas. I've also got some patients in Brisbane and Melbourne as well. So, sort of starting to really move across that eastern seaboard, I guess. And I think the idea
Yes.
is that, people actually get an opportunity to be heard. And I'm like so happy to hear your story and what's happening with you, and see if there's something we can do to help you. And our focus is very much on evidence-based care, but also
Mm,
on very individualized care. So we really try and meet women where they're at this phase. Yeah, yeah, because not everybody is, you know,
mm.
really
Yeah, for
educated with
sure, hundred
the
percent.
whole
And
deal. So we
it's
just sort of
similar to
move it along.
nutrition. Like it's not a one size fits all. So
Mm,
we are all individual. We all have our own lifestyles, journeys,
mm,
challenges. Like so, we all do need to also educate ourselves so we are aware and able to make the decisions like that, because I think there's a big disconnect just from an education point of view, like because obviously the education isn't coming down the line. So I think just being
mm,
able to talk out, hopefully what we can do is maybe investigate some of the things we kind of learnt in depth over the next few weeks and pass on that information. So we're fast tracking people learning what they need to know so they can
mm.
make decisions based on just
More
learning
education.
like what they need to know. So yeah, like
Mm,
what and then of course maybe
mm,
in the future we can both share our own story because you know like you, I didn't have much success when I first went to the
mm,
GP either, to try and find out what was going on. So I think sharing our own stories will be helpful, along the way for people to be able to relate to this whole situation.
mm. Mm, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, there's a few interesting things that I think are quite eye opening and worth talking about. Um, Particularly, so in Australia, the three
Wow.
biggest killers of women,
Mm.
number one is actually dementia in
Wow.
Australia. Number two is heart disease, and number three is osteoporosis. And sort of everybody worries about breast cancer as but we know that the mortality for breast cancer is dropping, which is
Hmm.
great. So if you are diagnosed with breast cancer, you're less likely to die from it. But it sort of falls in at sort of number 8, number 9 in terms of risk factors for women in death. Whereas the three big ones that I just talked about are all things that are modifiable diseases, I guess, things that you can do something about. And one of the things that you can do to support your health in
Hmm.
midlife against those chronic
Yes.
diseases
Yes.
is HRT.
Yes.
The other thing, of course, is nutrition, as you would know, and exercise. So, I think we all agree that, HRT is one part of the picture, but the
Mm.
other part of the picture is very much that lifestyle, and how those two
Yeah, for
things
sure.
combine is really what gives you the really
Yeah,
fantastic
and
outcomes.
yes, 100%. Because one of the things
A
that
good older
I think
life.
stuck with
Mm,
me coming out of the conference was like menopause is for the rest of your life. Like it's not this like, oh, we go through menopause. It's like it's for the rest of your life. So the ramifications of that and not actually doing something about it means what sort
mm,
of quality of life we're living till we're 85 here in Australia, women are. And the quality of those last years, the last, 20 years,
mm,
are terrible. We go downhill rapidly, like from those
yep,
three things that you talked about. And I
mhm,
don't want that for myself. And I certainly don't want
yep,
it for anyone that I'm helping or working with. And so, this is, I think, the
mhm,
conversation that really needs to come to the forefront is
mm,
that, what we do now matters to what we look like in 20 years' time. And does that mean I'm in the nursing home, unable to care for myself? Can I walk by
mm,
myself? Am I even alive still? We have to actually project like what sort of life do we want for ourselves. And if we can stay strong, we can protect ourselves with, HRT, balancing
mm,
our hormones, keeping our bones strong. Obviously, nutrition is essential for like all of the above. But this is it, what happens now matters.
mhm. Absolutely. And I often have a conversation with women during our appointments because I always have a nice long 45 minutes. We get plenty of time to chat. But one of the things that we talk about is the fact that until now, you can kind of get away with stuff, You can get away with not really paying attention to your diet. You can get away with not really exercising. But
Mhm.
menopause is really a line in the sand where you have to be a lot more intentional if if your desire is to live a healthy older life, then you have to start being intentional about how you behave in terms of how and what you eat, how and when you exercise, and the
That
other
really stuck. That
sort of
stuck
really what
out for
lifestyle
me.
choices that you make.
That
Mm.
that stuck out for
And
me
that
though.
includes
That like
things
we
like,
might be living to 85, but for 20 years we live in this terrible quality of life, And I'm like, I don't want that for myself.
no, no, and no, I don't think anyone would choose it,
And that's
but
the thing.
I
So I
guess by
think
not
that
being
that's what the
intentional, you're
conversation
almost
has to
making a
be,
choice.
like that we
So,
get a choice, and this is what the future can look
mm,
like, because we know, like you were mentioning, dementia, Alzheimer's,
mm,
osteoporosis, all of those things
mm,
double like after menopause, like compared to men. And the only thing is menopause, like that they can put it down to. And so,
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, estrogen is so protective. It's protective of our brains and our bones and our cardiovascular system. And as soon as that goes missing, our risk of, we always think that men have a higher risk of
mm,
heart attack.
mm,
Well, as soon
mm.
as that estrogen's gone, our risk is exactly the same as a man's. So
Did
we
you
just
have
have to,
any
I guess,
like
be
kind of
intentional
major
about the things that we're
takeaways that
doing.
kind of stuck
Mm.
with you that I mean, I know we learned a lot.
Yeah, I guess yeah, I guess one of the things that I really like to kind of talk about
Yes,
in my appointments
yes,
as it's appropriate for
yes.
people is sexual health and vaginal health, because we know that if you don't look after that area and you
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of atrophy, you're much more prone to getting
Wow.
UTIs, and that is a real killer of women. So, you kind of think of a UTI as kind of a simple infection, but actually, as you move into your older
Heck,
years, you're much more
this.
likely to become septic and die from a UTI, which is just incredible. So we really need to look after the health of, our vagina and our bladder health and our continence in order to avoid that
Mm,
down the track. And I think that was one of the things
mm.
that was a really good reminder for me
Yeah.
to pay attention to
and
that.
and
Like,
these
no,
are
I
the
think I was
conversations
wondering
we
about
need
my
to be
very
having,
healthy
I
vagina.
think, because that was a little bit of a standout for me too. It was like, women,
Mm,
or I can't remember, you probably might remember the percentage, but I felt like it was very high, if not everyone gets affected by some sort of change in the vaginal area. And if we actually lean into looking at the options of using
mm,
vaginal
mm,
estrogen, it's like face care for your vagina, and we should all be looking into it. So,
mm.
what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Yeah. So essentially what happens is the skin in your vagina area and around your labia and the opening, we call it the introitus to your vagina, actually becomes very thin. It loses its collagen, it loses its plumpness, and so it loses its ability to sort of secrete those, nice moist sensations that we would get when we were younger. So the cells are no longer moving downwards. So if a germ
Wow.
gets in there, there's nothing to kind of help move it back out again. And so that's what we're sort of talking about when you're more prone to those UTIs, because as soon as a germ gets into the area, there's nothing to kind of
Mm,
move it out. It gets a good opportunity to multiply and become problematic. And so, if we can keep that area,
mm-hmm,
a little bit more plump, give it a little bit more collagen, a collagen boost back, we can sort of keep some of the moisture in that area, which will then force, gravity is our friend. It forces those bugs to move on and move out, so that we don't end up with the UTI. So yeah, super important to do. And we've actually got a few different options in Australia now, which is great. So
mm-hmm.
there's nice little pessaries, which are just little pellets you can insert. There's creams. I quite like the cream because
Oh,
just quietly you can give your clitoris a swipe because it
great.
starts disappearing as well. I know,
As
it's
if
so
it's so
thin.
big anyway.
And I know, it's like the fun part goes offline. Yeah, I know. So, um, and there is also now we've got some nice waxy pellets that are quite good for people who have super problematic
So I
vaginal
actually,
areas. It really helps
sorry,
rebalance that
sorry.
microbiome
I actually use
because
the
a lot of
pessaries
yeah,
myself. Is there,
good.
like, what
Mm,
would the difference be between, I think this is quite helpful to talk
mm,
through, like, what would the difference between, say, the pessary or the cream or the other one that you mentioned? How
mm,
do they work?
mhm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
So the pessary you insert before you go to bed at night, because then obviously gravity is your friend. It just sort of slowly melts overnight and provides the
mm-hmm,
area with some nice sort of exposure to estrogen. That estrogen also crosses over the vaginal wall and can actually help your bladder. So, people who have an overactive bladder, it can really help reduce that sensation
mm-hmm.
of I've got to go to the bathroom and then not actually passing very much urine. So, um, The cream is very similar. I tend to tell
Hmm.
people to really, it's that bottom third of your vagina. That's the really problematic part. That's where, that's the introitus. So it does come with an applicator. The applicator is super
Sure.
annoying because you've got to rinse it every time. So I just go two thirds of your pointer finger and give your clitoris a swipe on the way past. And same deal. It just gets absorbed across the skin. It will actually sort of help support both your urethral health and your bladder health, as well as your vagina, by providing that, I guess, that little collagen boost in the area. There was some discussion about using
Yes.
it sort of
Wow.
here and
Good on
here,
you.
but each to their own, I guess.
So would there be a time where, I mean, they
Yeah,
both do the same thing, it's just different
yeah.
applications, or okay, yeah,
They both do a similar thing. It's really
yeah,
just personal preference, I think. It comes down to, some people find the
yeah,
cream a bit
okay.
messy. Some
I
people
think
find the
how
pellets a
like
bit hard
talking
to
that through is
insert.
helpful because
So yeah.
for me, my doctor just went, "Here's the pellet, pessaries," and so I didn't really even know there was another option. So this is where if we can open that conversation and like talk through like what are our
Mm,
options, like why would you do one or the other or different, or it doesn't really
mm,
matter, then
mm,
education is power. We know more, like
mm, mm.
mm,
Yeah, we can have conversations. Exactly. We've recently had a new little waxy pellet called Interossa, which is, it was registered for prescriptions in June or July last year. I've had a lot of success with women who have, I guess, felt that their vagina feels uncomfortable,
mhm,
doesn't smell great. Their microbiome has really changed, which is very common. So as soon as it becomes a little bit dry, obviously the different sort of
mhm,
microbiome kind of exists there, much like your gut, if you're, like your nutrition. Uh, and these waxy pellets really help just rebalance that, the pH of your vagina, and really help that kind of fix itself. It doesn't have as good a evidence for people with recurrent UTIs, but I found some
right.
people who, like, for them, this is the
Okay, so
thing
it
that is
kind of
bothering
comes
them
down
the
to like
most.
what
So, and
symptoms you're
that's the
presenting
majority.
with. From
Mhm.
from what I was gathering, from what I was hearing, it sounds like most women will have some sort of issues with the vagina changing, like regardless of what happens.
Mm. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. And, sometimes it takes a while for them to notice, and it really
hmm.
depends. So,
Hmm.
like you, I have a lot of athletic women who come and see me,
Hmm.
and you'll
Yeah,
find,
yeah,
they're like, oh, I can't ride my bike comfortably anymore. I can't wear pants
right.
comfortably anymore. I can't, like that sort of stuff is what bothers them. Um, and that's what often they'll present with. And then when you,
Mm,
dive a bit
mm,
deeper, they're also having,
mm.
problems with intercourse and, other things like that as well. So, yeah, but often the
Yeah,
presentation is
true.
just a little
So
bit
would
different
you
depending
agree
on
that
what
most
you're,
women could
where you're at.
like benefit from having some sort of
I really do. And I think some women,
hmm.
once they're sort of using some systemic HRT, things improve a little bit. But I actually feel that,
Because
quite
that was
strongly,
going to
that
be my
people
next
should also be
question. Like,
using
so
specific
people
vaginal
understand the
estrogen.
vaginal
So,
estrogen is not systemic, like, it's actually just localized to the vagina. That's why I kind of was like explaining it like being skincare for your
correct.
vagina, because it's just that area that's really being looked after. A systemic estrogen obviously affects
Mm.
your whole body. So if someone is taking systemic estrogen, will it be helping their vagina as well, or they do actually still need?
It does to a tiny, it does to a little degree,
Yeah.
absolutely. But
Okay.
I think that extra little boost is very useful. Yeah, I think
Mm,
a lot of people who start HRT are like, "Ooh, that actually feels better now." But I think that, down the track, it's going to be more and more necessary. It just, um, you know, there's some pretty horrific
Wow.
vaginas I've
Wow.
seen, that have atrophied
Mm.
right down to tiny little
Mm.
pinholes. So
No,
it's
no.
really
Well, we
important to
definitely don't
keep
want to be
abreast
in
of that
that
area. Yeah,
situation.
to
So
train
this
you
is
up.
why we're having this conversation. I suppose I'm going to ask a question
Mm,
for not
mm,
from my own personal, because I am actually now using both. However, I just, working with so many women, would get someone say, well, can you have too much? Like if I'm taking like systemic estrogen and then now I'm taking like vaginal estrogen, like how does that work? Like with what happens in that respect?
mm, mm. Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah. So I would use both mostly. Oftentimes starting with systemic
mm,
and then just seeing how things roll if they're not particularly interested. But just sort of constantly staying in touch. But yes, no, it's not too much. As you said, that vaginal estrogen is just very localized. Um, we think about
mm.
99.9% of it just acts locally. There's probably a very teeny tiny escape. But we're recognizing more and more that even for women with estrogen positive breast
Yeah,
cancers,
right.
vaginal estrogen is 100% safe for them to actually go ahead and use. So,
Mm.
to kind of mitigate some of the
Yes.
symptoms that they're
Yeah,
going
one of my
through,
friends is going
just
through this
often
at the
they're on
moment, actually.
estrogen blockers.
But she's
So,
actually living in
mm,
London at the moment, and they can buy
mm,
the
mm,
pessaries and the vaginal estrogen across the counter there. Yeah, I can just walk into the chemist.
yeah, hmm yeah. Every jurisdiction has
Do
a
you
different
think
rule.
that that will come for us?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whereas, I don't know. Maybe it'll
Yeah.
be maybe down the track. I can't
Yeah,
see it
yeah.
happening in the
There's
short
so
term,
much
but
more we can talk
maybe long
about.
term,
I mean,
yes.
we haven't even
Mm,
talked about testosterone yet. So I think this would be a great continuation. Like we have so many more topics we could cover. I would love to hear your, own story.
mm,
I think sharing our own stories would be like super beneficial for everyone to kind of
mm,
relate to the fact that we're over here journeying into, and often
mm.
like you, obviously you're a GP, and I'm a nutritionist, but
Yeah.
this is why we're good at what we do, because we're right here, like in the midst of it ourselves.
Mm, yes. Yeah. Yep. And I think I totally agree. I just
It's
don't
hard to
menopause is
imagine
later
it, isn't
menopause
it?
until you're menopausal.
You know? Yeah. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so true.
So
What
it
I
doesn't go
loved,
back
and I'll
then
just touch on,
until you're
is
there.
that when you said the education is going to start in the schools, I think that this is so awesome, because even if, as maybe you're in schools like learning this, you've got a mother, and your mother is going to go through menopause. Like you will, like maybe you might be a boy, like learning about it, and but one day you'll marry someone, or possibly, and they will go through menopause, or your mother will be going through menopause. And so this is why the earlier we're learning about it, because I don't know about your mum, but my mother, she has no recollection, and she went through it for like, I want to say at least 10 years, and it was not good. I was like, I'm not having my mother's menopause. She can't even remember
Mhm.
it. Mm. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I know.
generally affects the people around you.
That's
My
right.
little
That's right.
tagline is
Well, this
saving
has been
husbands'
so
lives.
great. Hopefully, this is just the start of Kate and I being able to have lots of good conversations, to be able to bring you lots more information, so we can, keep people learning and being educated. And
Mm,
what we'll do is make sure we've got links to both of us
mm,
here, so you can find either of us on social media, or, in our practices if you need any extra help. And stay tuned, and we'll come back and bring more of this great information your way. Thank you so much for joining today, Kate.
I would love to do that. Excellent.
Bye.
No worries. See you guys. Bye.